It's as if we're living in a giant New World Order race baiting machine. And what I'm seeing is this manufactured divide where you have controlled circumstances, controlled economies, real acts of what people call terror in response to U.S. occupation, and manufactured acts of terror. And the end result is what I see to be a lot of paranoia in the streets of America today, based on a lot of programming that's out there. And I'm here with Kyle Reardon. We're going to discuss this issue at greater lengths and why we see this rise in people acting in a fairly psychotic manner based on race, based on religion. And in my opinion, it's all part of the program. Kyle, welcome.
Yeah, it's good to be back with you, Alex, as always.
Right. So, what are your opening thoughts on this issue, which you're noticing as well in the so-called liberty movement aspects of it, mixing with the national white nationalism, and just in this day and age where this is a regular conversation about millions being forcefully ejected from this country based on not only religion but where they're from. Looking at closer at Trump's talking points, immigrants from countries compromised by terrorism. So, what
Well,
are some of the things that you've that stand out the most?
well, generally speaking, I don't like talking about issues of race and ethnicity publicly. However, much like the voluntarists that have come before me, I feel that I must speak out. I've noticed that, especially throughout last year of 2015, in various private conversations I've had with mainly those in the Patriot movement, that there was this assumption that for those who didn't necessarily know me all that too well, and people I was like making first impressions with, and even some of the locals here in Austin, where I still occasionally go to political meetings more just for entertainment value, not for like serious doing anything because they all want to work inside the system and beg for their freedom. But when I would talk to people in private conversations, they would make this assumption that I'm a Trump supporter solely based on literally my skin color. I have never had that happen to me before, ever in my life. And I know other folks, yourself included, have gone through various experiences where other folks treat you differently, usually in a negative fashion, in large part based on superficial characteristics like your physical appearance, or perhaps other more specific features. But when it happened to me, a lot of things clicked into place, and so yeah, it's just, and it didn't matter that I have now accrued a reputation as being against Trump, anti-Trump. There's even the phrase that I've tried to kind of encourage people to use, which is, humping the Trump. Oh yeah, humping the Trump. Because I think that's what they're doing, honestly. But yeah, just based strictly on my skin color, they make this assumption that I must like the guy. And then pretty much I stop being nice. And in those private conversations, I stop being nice. And, I straight up kind of make some remarks about neocons, George W. Bush, and some other things, and then they kind of back off. But yeah, coming face to face with the resurgence of neoconservatism is really nasty, at least for me.
And then stepping back 8 years, if you're white and not voting for Obama or critical of Obama, maybe you're a racist. So we've seen the rise in media-driven attempts to categorize innocent people. Meanwhile, we see millions dead in the Middle East and Africa and other countries. And, the propaganda concerning the Middle East and the people that live there and terrorism, sources of terrorism, it's truly contaminated this nation at this time, to the point where it's almost like there's no going back. And I wish some of these white nationalists understood that the path that they're being directed in the end is going to hurt white people. Granted that in reality, in my opinion, it's the New World Order's agenda to create this domestic unrest to weaken this country for something later on. To me, any rational-minded person could see this manufactured divide, especially those that were perhaps 9/11 researchers back in the day, and now they're on board the Donald Trump proposal to ban Muslim immigrants or to evict the ones that are currently here, or ones from countries compromised, quote unquote, by terrorism. So that's fundamental in all of this. What concerns me also as we see these staged terror attacks and reports of ISIS in the United States is just a real genuine concern, compassion, and fear for Middle Eastern immigrants and even some Latinos living in urban environments where it's just raging. The paranoia is just raging, and it's not affecting all communities the same, but we could see how the media is driving that. And even people that know that there are sinister forces, Western intelligence forces behind ISIS, that doesn't stop them still from fearing Middle Eastern immigrants, because the narrative is that they're intentionally bringing through all of these immigrants. Oh, it's Obama the Muslims plan. And so you have a blurring of the lines here and just widespread panic in addition to distortion. Meanwhile, the economy continues to sink. The nation's military continue to prepare for World War III. Massive war games, bigger than ever each year. All the countries, it's their biggest every year now. They're just building and building and building. And going up into space and setting up all this stuff for this thing that they're planning for. It's going to lead to this other thing. I suspect this new proposed global government structure after the war. But anyways, they don't want us thinking about that. It's this false invasion, and it's the traditional cry wolf scenario, Kyle. Just like we heard when we were kids about cry wolf. And so now you're dealing with, by and large, a lot of Americans that are tuning out completely from information sources because of the abundance of propaganda. Is that good? So you have a dumbing down effect of people tuning out from updates on real world events because so much of it is distorted. And of course, it's easy to see how conspiracy research has gotten a really bad name as of lately. I see very few voices at all in the alternative media that are speaking about this New World Order race bait machine, this controlled, manufactured, it's not very difficult to see, and immediately raises concerns about those individuals that can't see it.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, man.
That can't see it, that are participating in it, and then someone comments on one of my Facebook posts saying, he noticed a big shift in Henry from Red Ice Creations, and I've mentioned him many, many times. It's not just Alex Jones. It's not just Paul Joseph Watson that have gone from reporting on the New World Order to being a tool of the New World Order, literally. And then we go, how did this happen?
Yeah.
How did so many of these people become infected? Then we see Rinse.com. Afghan Muslim animal rapes. 5-year-old girl. Repeat headline. And so they've built it up into their niche that's who they are. That's what they cover. And then you have these other people that are like the reposters, that aren't researchers themselves, and they're just repeating the talking points. They have misunderstood the real meaning when they use it of white genocide. Oh no, we're against the white race being exterminated. Here are all these articles saying that we're being exterminated. What real Nazis believe, what real white supremacists believe, is that white genocide is a decline of the white race based on mixing. So you have a situation here in America where this has become a driving subject of the white-dominated alternative media, which I've been a part of as a mixed race human being. And, a big part of my journey and dialogue has been the identification with the soul over bloodline. I've had my own experiences, and I've also seen the sheep-like nature of both sides of my family. So I identify my own inquisitive nature to be that of my soul that is currently inhabiting physical human form, and probably for a reason, like all of us. So some of my spiritual leanings have directly come from my own experiences and always seeking a more saner, logical, and in some cases it is looking at the deeper question as to what we really are, not our race. It's very troubling, and I'm going to add in a few other things. There's also, when you look at how many are dead in the Middle East, you don't just see an abundance of white people with their mouth shut. You see black people with their mouth shut.
Yeah.
You see Hispanics with their mouth shut. But most troubling of all, you have Afghans in the United States that are of influence, that speak English, that are at universities, that are doctors, that are not exactly what we would call jihadi tailheads, that have been established here for multiple decades, that have done absolutely nothing to at least shine a greater light on the victims of war and ask the greater questions as to who benefits. Cui bono. And so what is problematic with this discussion with the Middle East and all these people that are dead and all these people that have immigrated here that are peaceful Muslims or peaceful Middle Eastern immigrants is that you have a lot of people that aren't doing very much to educate others as to what's really going on. The people of this country and this world can make those the driving topics in these elections. Not to mention surveillance and other things that are really important but are not on the table now. And, I think that there's something very subtle, subconscious going on with this. The dehumanization of the Arab, of the Jew even as well, but the Arab, the Persian. And so, when I see these alternative media websites and the types of news that they're picking, it's very archetypal. And we also see this in Hollywood. We see this in, was it 300?
Probably, yeah.
And it was regarding the Spartans. And there's other things in Hollywood where they're bringing back archetypal things. And, years ago when Bush was the president, people like Clyde Lewis would say they're thinking with their 13th century minds, because it was very archetypal. And people looking at, the reentry into the Middle East as a new crusades. However, they're not able to see that with Donald Trump, which is really interesting. And so, in his recent speech, we're going to go after the barbarians.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to go after the barbarians. The wall. We're going to build a wall. See, my speculation is first of all, there's a problem in this country with white people. There are white people that are not racist, that are unable to see the racism in other white people or people in general, because it's not a part of their way of thinking, to the point where people argue and say there's no racism in this country, which is just ridiculous. Now, regardless of where it comes from, I think there's something about our cellular memory that can be reactivated by words and symbols. And I'm not the first person to say that the human body can react to certain programming or stimuli that can activate, for lack of a better terminology, but it is considered scientific, their reptilian brain. So that's what I'm seeing right now. Something's like being activated in the collective reptilian brain of these so-called awakened truthers. And it is sleight of hand because, as I've said for years, there is some sort of a planned occupation, I believe, at some point. And you can see China and Russia building up for this conflict. So as they get everybody distracted in this artificial realm, artificial reality of fear and the false Islamic invasion, while the controllers, and not just George Soros, please, people. It goes deeper than that. Control immigration. And in some areas, they may be flooding an area of Germany. And why is that? I mean, the rational person could step back and go, the controllers are creating a destabilization situation. But if they were pro-Muslim, why are they bombing their homelands? If they're so pro-Muslim, They're not necessarily pro these people. They displace them and then throw them into refugee camps. And then if you look at the stats in Europe, a high level of the kids are being trafficked into Europe. And, it's not just white slavery, you have Persian slavery, not just at the hands of Saudi Arabians. As if I have to mention, countless stories of rape, brutal rape of victim of war in these Middle Eastern countries. Then, of course, you have the ongoing UN troop scandals in Africa. But if we just look at Afghanistan and Iraq, you can go back to 2005, where Cynthia McKinney grilled Rumsfeld with regards to DynCorp, trafficking little girls and boys. So that was way back in 2005, and we're 11 years later. And it's not that that's no longer going on. It's that it's just simply not talked about. There aren't wide-scale protests. There's no Afghan Lives Matter hashtag. And someone could try to start one, and that would be a nice thought, but really, I can understand the whole concept of what's the friggin' point. I post something about the victims of war in Afghanistan. Nobody likes the link. Nobody shares it. Hardly anyone cares. And that's the truth. Now, I can live with that and deal with that, but I'm going to come to what I believe is a rational understanding. And the rational understanding is anything but something you'd see. It's anything but the new Black Panther ideology or the way they're getting others, minorities, to react. Oh, white people are the devil now. White people are the enemy. And see, they create that narrative for others that have been disenfranchised and oppressed so they can maintain racial conflict. So you have a white genocide. Oh my God, the whites are being killed. And then on the other end of the football field of this game of life, you have black genocide. Everybody stand around while the black people are being exterminated by white officers. And that narrative is real. And then, by the way, though, all of you are under threat of the Islamic threat. So we need you all in the military. Then we can have the blacks, the Hispanics, and the whites working together. Yeah, that's really friggin' sad, Kyle. That's really freaking sad that is the racial unity that does exist in this country.
Yeah, militarism, right?
Together. Here, let's all give you a paycheck. Here, men are going to bond. You're going to do MMA when you're not fighting. You're going to live together in these barracks. You're going to lift weights and push 4 plates. You're going to screw a few girls. You're going to travel to the Middle East. It's perverted.
Yeah.
Because, there's something about traveling and maybe meeting new women, doing new things, but going to combat in a foreign land as that being your rite of passage. So I'm going to pause there. I see a world on fire in an energetic spiritual sense right now. It may not be a physical fire, but it is there and it is raging. And we're making this podcast to help people walk through it. Because in my opinion, they're trying to get us to react. All of us. Doesn't matter whether you're white. Doesn't matter whether you're Hispanic, whether you're black, or you have blood from the Middle East. They're trying to activate that fear inside you. And maybe even get you thinking crazy, like you got to prepare and do something about this. Do something about this group. And, if we sit back and we look at like this risk game of life that we're in right now, we can literally probably detail multiple problems or multiple. Oh, am I still on?
Yes.
It looked like it dropped for a minute.
No. I'll edit this part out. Just go.
We can see multiple programs happening concurrently. If we look back, if we step back and look at the larger picture.
Yeah, and that militarism you're mentioning being really the only source of unity among the various races is pretty disgusting and is really appalling to anybody of an anti-war sentiment. And, I don't know, I was just thinking about several things you said reminded me of a lot of other things, too, I think need to be said. In several of those private conversations I mentioned earlier, in one of them, the person I was talking to, the individual, accused me of having white guilt because I didn't support Donald Trump. And then basically I yelled at him in front of a room full of people, and I hoped I embarrassed him because I didn't feel embarrassed at all. But I literally yelled at a guy for being so ignorant, because I have been against the social justice warriors and their politically correct nonsense for years. And really, and especially in more recent months, and definitely last year when it got really, really bad, it was pretty much the patriots just abandoned us libertarians to this politically correct nonsense and, false rape accusations, stories, and other types of things. And now I'm being accused of white guilt because I don't support a neoconservative. And that's interesting, too, because, Alex, you mentioned earlier about the white genocide narrative, too. And it's interesting that there were other libertarians like Christopher Cantwell and Stefan Molyneux who apparently have abandoned all of their principles by also jumping on not just the Trump bandwagon, but also promoting this white genocide narrative, which anybody who ever bothered to check the U.S. Census Bureau's figures, last time I checked, people of a fair skin complexion, lighter skin complexion, I don't think they're quote-unquote dying out anytime soon, even when you look at like the 40, 50, 60 plus year projections by the Census Bureau. The evidence in terms of just the sheer numbers doesn't support it, and that's falsifiable. So, it's just, I'm
and
sick
someone
of...
could look at Portland, where the demographics are nearly all white now, since it became a super popular place. And I remember pointing out one of the covers of Willamette Week, it's the equivalent of the, Austin Alternative magazine as well. I forget the name of it down there. But it ran with the story, 30 great things about Portland. And I don't know who thought it would be kosher to add into their 30 points, Portland was mostly white.
Oh, my
But
Lord.
it was in the 30 points. And what I noticed was a soft form of racism that I call tribalism, where people aren't overtly a white supremacist, but they prefer to be around the people they feel safer around. And some of this is based on their previous experiences, being that Portland was receiving an influx of white hipsters from perhaps more downtrodden urban areas, such as San Francisco, Oakland, California, Los Angeles, California, New York, New York, and other Midwest small towns. It's had an influx of both urbanites and people leaving the farmland for Portlandia. And so it's created a situation where economics have resulted in great displacement, but not only of minorities, of course, but of older white residents as well. But I'm just using that as an example because I was living in Portland when I was starting to see this stuff really build up on these websites. And I'm looking around seeing the opposite of the white genocide that these people are speaking about.
Yeah.
And I also want to add in, and we don't have time to really go in depth in this because it's a separate subject, but it's not just racial, it's gender. So we started to touch on that in another podcast. But when you combine man versus woman competing in the workplace, and that's been a part of our reality for a while, but I mean, it gets to be a very cutthroat world out there, especially in popular areas where people want to live. And you have, the shredding of thousands of jobs and people competing for restaurant jobs, which is kind of a sad musical chairs job reality that a lot of Americans live in. And it's not a good sign for the future. It's not good economically with so many people dependent, and I've talked about this for years, on a service industrial complex bubble that only exists because of other forms of bubble and credit that have yet to pop. And what happens when those things dry up, and aspects of the real economy of the people, when we're left holding the bag, as so many other people have put it, during the next major collapse and shredding of jobs and economic restructuring, as we become more and more dependent on robots that are replacing our jobs. So you have a combination of the manufactured racial tensions and gender tensions, most of it based over resources and access to resources, combined with, of course, staged events. What's troubling about the whole ISIS propaganda and the white genocide obsession, you have a large amount of people that are of mixed race in this country that are pretty much forced out of any healthy political debate with any of these individuals that are on board this white nationalism. It's like they've entered some sort of a psychosis, where all these people from all these places are this way and they're this way. Yet they can't show me a white utopia where it's all white and there's no police and there's no problems. You might have areas where there's a whole lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't have a lot of burglaries. You're still going to have molestation. You're still going to have murder of passion, crimes of passion. That's probably one of the more common. Still going to have car accidents. Still going to have alcoholism. Still going to have issues like that. And so the fact of the matter is, people are doing themselves a disservice, by entering into this delusion, that this group is invading them and the wall is the solution, instead of realizing where the controllers are, that they may want to build a wall to keep us in. They may want to build a wall to keep the American people in. Now, I believe Ron Paul may have alluded to that. I'm not so sure. I know back in the day when people would talk about a wall, there were people that would pipe up and go, this is a trap. And I think that people should be a little bit more concerned about their own welfare and well-being, security and safety, with the discussion about a wall being put up to surround them. And the lack of questioning regarding this is just more evidence of cognitive impairment in our society today on both the controlled left and the right. Because the controlled left could really call out the real agenda behind Donald Trump. It's not just Donald Trump doing this. It's not just some rogue maverick outside the political establishment. There's a reason he's on TV. There's a reason he's saying just enough to galvanize the support of neo-Nazis, to keep people out there upset and angry and point in the face of black people. And you look at the rallies and protests, and you can see a racial divide in response to what's happening politically, and that's very sad on the part of everybody. And I mean even the people that are attacking Trump's supporters, because they're now in this paradigm that they're being threatened by this group that has its leader, Donald Trump, has telegraphed what he's really saying and thinking. He has clearly said racially charged statements to provoke a reaction from the people. So as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump is leading his people into a trap. The people going to the rallies, the things that Trump has said, he is leading these people into a trap. He doesn't give a damn about off-the-gridders. He doesn't give a damn about white people. He doesn't give a damn about anyone. As some people have said, everything that he says is a lie. But maybe not. We're also talking about a man that says maybe we should shoot down those Russian jets. We need to renegotiate our deals with China. Well, what the hell does that mean? The man has openly said he's going to do some radical things once he's in office. Again, as far as I'm concerned, the actions of Donald Trump are going to end up hurting white people.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of obvious. And I don't know, but it's also the private conversations I've been having that also kind of disturbed me too, because I don't think anybody's even mentioned this in the alternative media before, so I might as well whistleblow on it. Another detail that came up in a different discussion I had when I was at a different political meeting, not a Trump rally, but just something else, was that, well, dude, this is what the guy told me. Dude, did you know that racialism is not the same as racism? And it's just like, okay, does it even matter? I mean, and also there's a little bit of a more fundamental question. Like, who are the white people, quote unquote? Seriously, who are white people? Because I would like to know. Now, I am familiar with Europe's history, going back centuries, and let's see, last time I checked, there were the Celtic peoples, who are different from the Anglo-Saxon Jews, who are usually Germanic of some flavor, who in turn are different from the Franks, which later led to the French people, and others. And so there's different ethnicities, to be sure, Heck, just look at Eastern Europe and the various different noticeable peoples and ethnicities in that portion of the world. But seriously, when I hear some of these so-called white nationalists talk about the white race, who are they even talking about? I mean, heck, my own lineage, from what I've been able to piece together, were basically, at least in part, Scots-Irish. So, anybody who understood the history of when England forcibly conquered Ireland, when Ireland was a free country that had I guess you could say, a very limited government, I guess is one way of putting it. And then, of course, that got absorbed by the British Empire being a very absolute government, which I don't think is contested. Can it really be said that the Irish and the British, the Imperial British, are all like part of the one big happy white family? I mean, this is ridiculous for those of us who actually understand history. And this is I'm only mentioning, European history and then translating that over to America, of course, with the Irish immigration and such. That's not even counting other portions of the planet, like those of a broader Arabic ancestry, or those of a broader African ancestry, and so forth. I mean, Alex, I remember in 2002 when the TSA was brand new, and they were overtly harassing, racially profiling, ethnically profiling those of a broader Arabic ancestry because they were worried about the supposed Islamic terrorism, when in fact it was discovered pretty much at the time that it was actually a mix of different people who, yes, were Arabic of one kind or another, but of different religions, or even some that were atheists or just more secular people. And my personal favorite were the Coptic Christians, who were harassed by the TSA repetitively throughout 2002. At least that was what was documented. So, who are the white people? I mean, seriously, I think the folks who are promoting the white genocide narrative and so forth really have, I'm going to just be honest, have their head up their ass. I really do. And, I mean, me personally, I mean, one of my colleagues, of course, is Louis B. of Crotshot Radio. He's a Puerto Rican. You yourself, you're mixed. It's just, I mean, even my own life with the people I associate, this isn't like a big deal because I'm not a collectivist. I don't think in terms of these groups based on skin color or hairstyle or what shirt you're wearing on a particular day of the week. This is ridiculous. I think of people in terms of them being individuals. Even the authoritarians, whether they're cops or legislators or judges or, pick a government job. I still think of them as individuals when they're being, tyrannical and harassing motorists at the side of the road and so forth. So yes, when you're mentioning, Alex, about this particular type of collectivism, what some people would call like race consciousness or racial collectivism, which is what I think it really is. I mean, this is the evils of this in-group, out-group crap that psychologists have been warning people about at least for decades in the mainstream, psychological literature. I mean, this is crap. And now, I know other people have been affected by it, obviously, and now I'm getting dragged into it. I mean, this has got to stop if we're going to live in peace and liberty.
Very cyclical and reminiscent of Nazi Germany. And the worship of the human with the blue eyes and blonde hair. And in no way we're demonizing any group. But what I do believe now with all this hysteria is one way to be guaranteed American is to have blue eyes and blonde hair, or tan hair, maybe green eyes. Once you start trailing off into the darker beards and the brown eyes, you're also dealing with the potential of different ethnic groups other than Middle Eastern, but it doesn't matter. There are aspects of our society that are operating on some kind of a programming wherever it's come, and I suspect it from a dark spiritual place. That's the only thing that makes sense to me at this point. I actually also heard another YouTuber say that he asked somebody who was Middle Eastern where he was from. He was at a gym, he asked him where he's from, and he said he was nervous at first before telling him he was from Iraq. And he felt bad because he felt judged because he was white. And I thought that was really short-sighted to be selfish, and it's because the reality is A lot of people are asked that, and I've been asked that, and it's automatically assumed that you're a foreigner from a foreign land and not natively born because you don't match a certain archetypal look. Or because, and if I don't speak, I obviously sound like I speak American, but what if someone doesn't see me speak? And my hair's been grown out and I have a mini beard. It to certain people, I look a certain way. And, traveling in urban environments during a period where there's all types of panic about Syrian immigrants and even stories about all the Middle Eastern immigrants. There's another one on Rents he's posting. They're bringing TB. So they're not bringing terrorism. They're bringing tuberculosis. And they're infecting the state of Colorado. That's another top story on Rents.com. It's really sad and unfortunate that more white people and black people and others, and especially Middle Eastern immigrants, aren't seeing that there's some sort of an artificial program like in works to create the sense of hysteria. As for the TSA, I'll never forget first submitting to the body scanner, leaving Philadelphia in 2013, but then getting the pat down. And being treated like garbage simply because I was vocalizing how strange that was. But complying without videotaping the entire time. But being incredibly rude to me because I was thrown off by the whole experience, like I should expect that.
That's not right.
And my hair was longer at that time. And this was right around the time of the Boston Marathon thing, bomber.
Yeah, fear.
At that time, my hair was longer. There was a likeness. Whether those in the audience can see it or not, there was a likeness. And to top it all off, for those that don't know, the last name that I inherited is Islamic. And I don't plan to change my name. So, I got to live in a world that's totally different than the average patriot. They live with the narrative. The Muslims are coming to kill them. Obama's a Muslim, and he's bringing in the Muslims. He's favoring Muslims. The white race is under attack. Others live another narrative. Maybe one day they're going to be killed and rounded up. And it is so unfortunate that they have split consciousness down the line so much along racial lines. There's so many out there that claim they care about freedom and liberty, that don't want to be smeared themselves, that show absolutely no emotion. Zero emotion. As if they have ceased to be a regular human being. I think that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a manufactured zombie apocalypse of a different kind. And it's only going to hurt these people and their communities later on because this is all being done to destabilize this country. So if they end up in a situation of complete paranoia based on perception of race and the amount of melatonin in one's skin, and they pull a lever and there's no power and there's a war, you don't have a united country. You have a country torn apart and fighting over resources. Of course, I'm talking about a crash situation. People are hurting each other. When it comes to stealing and robbing and looting, when I hear stories about racially motivated rapes and attacks, I don't care who it is or what it is. I sense evil. I see the media reporting on things that's playing into people's mental illness at this time. And shall I say evil spirits. And it's like it's a witch's brew. It is satanic. I can't hold that back. It is absolutely satanic what we're looking at. So, to end this point, people should be real careful the types of things that they're obsessing on when it comes to other people. Heaven forbid, sniping at refugees. Can you imagine for anybody that claims to believe in Jesus or the idea of karma or the golden rule, the type of karmic consequences that can come upon someone that jokes about sniping Syrian refugees? I wonder how some of these people are going to fare if we're ever occupied by China, spiritually speaking. And it comes down to that. Yeah. And it comes down to all the men and women that have done evil to others. How are they going to fare when the lights go out? They ought to be real concerned. So I look in the direction of Jeff Rentz and Alex Jones, these others. Where are they trying to lead these people? What are they trying to do to these people? Are they even aware of their actions? Are they even aware of their programming?
Leading them off a cliff is more like it. I mean, I don't know. It's just one other detail about a different private conversation, too, I think is also germane and really also shows the hypocrisy of this new white nationalism, I guess you could call it, is that I was discussing at length with one of the patriots, who I guess you could call a common law aficionado, for lack of a better term, not a sovereign citizen, but just somebody who reads law a lot. And I was basically describing with him about what the medieval Irish did in terms of their limited government that was so limited they basically, in all honesty, really didn't have a government. And what was really horrible, Alex, was that when I was describing about how they were able to have a free market in justice and adjudication services, it was just the first thing out of his mouth was, well, you know what? It was a good thing that the British forcibly conquered the Irish because those Irish were savages. That was the word he used. That's how he described some of my ancestors. So there are no white people as far as I'm concerned. It's just, I don't know, anybody who really traces this back can see that this is just all lies. And really there is an evil afoot. I will agree with you about that. It is demonic. I may not myself fully understand it, but it's there, and it will lie to you. It will claim we're all one big happy family, but you go in the history and nope. And so, even the other day I was called a Muzzy sympathizer, quote unquote. Muzzy being a slur, a degenerative slur for the word Muslim, of course. So I'm a marked man now for doing absolutely nothing wrong except giving a damn about peace and liberty. And trying to say, hey, for people who care about freedom, let's work together and, try to push forward together a vision of liberty, at least for Americans, at bare minimum, at least on this portion of the North American continent. Can we do that much? And
they fail to see that we're being pulled into global government. They can go Brexit here and talk about an IRE exit as well, Ireland exiting, but still pull those nations into a war coalition for a later point in time. It's obviously on the radar. And we are also not seeing a real organic nature to this. We're seeing all of a sudden, like a machine, this far-right nationalism popping up, not just in the United States, but in Europe. And, all based in animal response to the quote-unquote immigration crisis, again, which is controlled not by the people, but by the same people that are engineering the wars. And they're not tying those together. They're not connecting those. They've made sure that they've separated those. They're losing their humanity. And it's a slippery slope. It's a descent. And I believe a lot of things are cyclical, rise and fall of civilizations, and going to the dark ages and then rising out and having an enlightenment or a renaissance. That's also why I think some of the solar flare research is interesting, because it matches some of those cycles. So I think that we're going into some troubling years ahead. And I'm just seeing the stuff build. And, this is the other reason why you're seeing more people of different backgrounds. They may have different concerns, but retreating into off-grid areas or rural areas, even if they're not off-grid, outside of the major cities, because of what the major cities are turning into. People go out to the nightclubs and they go out for a drink and they get into some fights, and the programming that they were infected with carries over to the real world. There was a clip I saw from Robert West of Film the Police Portland. And he was filming someone that go back to Iraq. And I've actually seen a couple videos where there were Middle Eastern men that were at a bar. And they were getting into an argument with some other guys, more like on the buff military end of things. And they're screaming, go back where you came from. There was another incident. It was the flag burning incident in Portland, Oregon. you have the patriots, they're coming to reclaim the flag and tell someone they don't have the freedom to burn a flag that's all about freedom that they claim that they fought for. They fought for our freedoms. Well, you got the girlfriend of Patriot pushing another woman, telling her to go back where she came from. Well, I don't know whether she had a scarf on, whether she was profiled to be Muslim. She was definitely a brunette, and she definitely had a nose that I would consider to be maybe, someone in her line from another part of the world that would be ethnic. And it's sick because if we cut right down to it, it is sometimes, it's eugenics. It's like, back in old Europe, it's about the jawline and nose, and something is bringing back that psychosis. Like people can profile someone based on their beard, their nose, and in some ways they can. In some ways they can't. Someone could be mixed with a combination of genetics and really be a whole new human. And to recenter this on what I believe to be the truth versus the sickness. So in white nationalism, specifically white supremacy ideology, you're dealing with pure bloodlines as opposed to inferior lines based of mixed genetics. And the reality is that's what people mean in many cases when they talk about white genocide and white numbers declining. And it's the purity of certain lines. And again, this is the real evil of all of it. I've met a number of people mixed of different lines where they've been writers, where they've created works of art, where they've used their intellect, as well as seeing people supposedly of a pure line remain in a state of white trash. Yeah. And not actually creating their own content, but race baiting, like they know something. So, I'm not even hypothesizing on what's better than the other. What I can say is that I've met plenty of these people that claim that they're of a pure line that aren't doing anything for anybody, but trying to put other people down as if it's making them feel better. Meanwhile, I've seen plenty of people involved in media and others that are obviously mixed. I've also seen people completely asleep, of all different racial backgrounds, Afghani included. And I think that's really important. So, I think that people have really strayed away from more of a human, inquisitive nature into their soul and who they are and what makes up a human being. The very fact that this is going on, that there's this type of New World Order race-baiting machine is indicative of some very evil forces at foot. The troubling thing is now they have the internet. Now they have television. And we have televisions, and it doesn't really matter if someone says that they've woken up and they've turned off their TV. If they're on YouTube and they're just going down the subscription feed, I don't even look at it anymore. Because I don't even see like that many organic alternative media channels that I've subscribed to. It's a bunch of mainstream alternative and mainstream media garbly-goo and just chaos news in different directions. Probably the most relevant news is a big forest fire in California burning 33,000 acres. But other than that and some other things, it's just a big machine of insanity. Through this obsession with technology and the lack of connection to nature and people from different ethnic groups, a lot of people are now living in this artificial reality box, living on the internet, experiencing invasions and tears and rapes and threats from other lands and places, but not actually in the real world. And at the same time, they're taught that the New World Order is solely in charge of this thing called multiculturalism, or the idea of people from different backgrounds coexisting. So instead of people actually realizing the New World Order is all about race war, race baiting, and countries being invaded, they've pushed a false narrative that the New World Order wants to unite all people. Instead of unite all these control freaks that are behind many of these wars, and sometimes these world leaders collaborate with other world leaders and they stage wars, like what I'm suggesting China and Russia are going to be doing together, as well as the United States and Russia, not to get too out there. And so we really got to bring this back into a more human golden rule. How do people want to be treated? And, and I'll close this point out. There was Ron Paul. Again, vast differences between Paul and Trump. And then Ron Paul had a golden rule related speech. What if? What if America was occupied in Chinese territory, or there was China occupied territory in Texas, and people were called terrorists for fighting back. And we look at the way the Middle Eastern people have been demonized. And people don't even think twice about, on Facebook posting a picture of a UN helmet with a bullet through it without seeing the hypocrisy there. So you're talking about you're going to rebel when they occupy this country. But we're taught to fear all people from countries in which our nation has occupied. I'll just pause there and let that sink in. It's the Twilight Zone. I mean, what kind of a reality is this? What kind of a inverted reality is this in which the masses are able to swallow that narrative?
It's a crazy land. I mean, you were mentioning earlier about the periodic or cyclical nature, and that just reminded me about, more historically, like in World War I, it was the Americans of German ancestry who were experienced bigotry and prejudice here and were spat on and so forth. And obviously during World War II, it was the Americans of a more specific, a more Japanese ancestry that, of course, were forcibly interred by that socialist FDR's federal government. And now with this war on terror that's not supposed to end for, a century or whatever that one general said, this war on terror, allegedly, it's now the Americans of a broader Arabic ancestry that are now the quote-unquote the enemy. It's almost like watching like a Nazi propaganda poster almost. So yes, there is the demonization of foreigners who have caused us no harm. There is that angle of it, yes. However, simultaneously, and you've mentioned this as well, that there are the Americans whose ethnicity happens to match or otherwise be kind of close to the evil enemy image. And in the last two world wars, just last century, this happened too with other folk. I mean, this is just sheer lunacy. So
and
yeah,
the one media outlet that, in my opinion, was, as far as propaganda goes, worse than all the networks. Alex Jones of Infowars.com with the images early in the year of the brown hand grabbing at the white woman, and whatever was manufactured there by the controllers in Cologne, Germany, and what did or did not happen. I mean, that was way over the top. And then doing caricatures, going, Allah Akbar, I rape you, white woman, I hit you over the head. I mean, that was...
It's like looking at Goebbels, right?
I don't have a clip of anyone on Fox News doing that, Kyle. Maybe they haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen either. And in fact,
he went from trying to help people, man, and I'm on the verge of tears. I'm just flabbergasted, to the worst of the worst with that one.
Well, yeah, when he did and I know what you're talking about, I watched the same video, it's like, wow, I guess he's Goebbels now. I mean, like, Minister of Propaganda, I mean, that is the fat man, as I call him, right here locally in town. The fat man is Goebbels. And it's also kind of atrocious, too, because the fat man likes to mention about Texas a lot. Here's what's relevant about Texas, especially when we're talking about issues of ethnicity and so forth. The Texas War for Independence, or the Texas Revolution, if you prefer, in 1835 and 36. The Americans that emigrated here, mostly of a broader European ancestry, of course, actually worked hand in hand with the original natives of Texas, who are the Tejanos, to actually resist Santa Anna's tyrannical, actually, ironically, federal government when they came around to the different Mexican states, including Tejas and Coahuila, which was a combination of Texas and Coahuila at that time. And Santa Anna was pillaging and just destroying and just leveling entire towns. For people who are history buffs, look up the Massacre of Zacatecas, which actually is much more important than the Alamo. So considering what happened at Zacatecas and elsewhere, yeah, the people of a European ancestry that had come to Texas and settled here worked alongside, were literally brothers in arms with the Tejanos, because the Tejanos didn't like Santa Anna and the the Mexicans from further south, coming up north here and destroying property and murdering people. So folks can get together to restore their liberty, maybe not necessarily in the context of a revolution, which is what happened here in Texas, but at least work together to bring forward a vision of not just a vision, but a reality of living in peace and liberty, and that is the Texas tradition. So yes, like you were mentioning earlier, Alex, hashtag Afghan Lives Matter. I mean, heck, why leave it at that? I mean, heck, I'll go another step. Hashtag Iraqi Lives Matter. Or probably to really get under the skin of the patriots who are calling me a race traitor now, well, here's my revenge. Hashtag Syrian Lives Matter. Check and mate. Yeah, they want to joke about sniping the refugees? Syrian Lives Matter. And yeah, you could also say more broadly, hashtag Human Lives Matter. So yeah, these folks that are now going on this racial collectivism, as far as I'm concerned, Alex, they have betrayed their own principles. They're the traitors as far as I'm concerned, because they're hypocrites. And frankly, I do not really see much of a difference, to be perfectly frank with you in the audience. I don't really see a difference between them and the authoritarians who run the government, frankly. And that's pretty much where I'm coming from. So I think it's very important for people to really kind of, and you've said it before many times, is that when they're associating with people, get to know people and vet them as much as you can, even if it's just, just talk to people, have a beer with them, have a coffee with them or whatever, and, try to feel them out. It's not just a matter of security culture, it's also a matter of not accidentally surrounding yourself with folks who are, shall I say, almost of a genocidal mindset in a sense, or let me put it this way, eugenics, more of a eugenics mindset, like you were mentioning. Me personally, I don't want to associate with eugenics.
Some of the chemtrails aren't there to weed out certain humans and to allow other humans to flourish in certain environments that they're terraforming. And I'm not the first one to propose that, but there's certainly something going on in a world of bioweapons and the such.
Yeah, and look, I don't want innocent people of any, let's say, physical characteristics. I don't want any innocent people getting murdered or genocided, or as is the case with government, being democided. I want there to be justice. I want those who provably, and even have their rights respected in terms of due process and such, but I want the people who are legitimately criminals to be punished for things that they actually did to hurt others. And by the way, there is such a thing as incitement. That's not free speech. There is such a thing as incitement when you're trying to, when certain people are trying to rile up a crowd to the point of engaging in physical violence, and not self-defense, of course, but in terms of mob violence, in terms of riots.
Exactly, because you have stories of the football player, the black football player, and of course this is going to evoke the response from people that feel threatened by stories like this without understanding from a deeper perspective what's really going on. Gang raped a white girl with his black friends. No one's endorsing rape when we want to take a more critical look at how the media has played a role in screwing up a lot of people's heads, including black people's, some of them, that are fed their own narrative. And it's very unfortunate because it's happening on all sides. And we're really able to see it right now in this day and age. When I look at the future and I see the kind of karmic consequences coming back to some of the people in this country, it's very disturbing that a lot of white people don't understand the threat that they're under. When you create a situation where you have all these white people demonizing all these people around the world and buying the propaganda, and so many examples we can go into. And then you have other situations that follow in that country, like a war or a collapse. Certain groups could be put into power by the real controllers that aren't necessarily doing it for the white race in the end, or the white people or white Americans. When you look at foreign troop drills in this country, You look at the past, it's not just countries from Europe. You have countries from South America. There's major plans for the future. So, when you look at the reality of a collapsed, occupied America, you have a great potential for white slavery based on years of anger at white Americans. And I'm not for that, but I see the same program coming at a later cycle. And what we're going through now as an appetizer, as this case is built against America, and you can even say the American people as things progress, especially if they can show the world all these people supporting Donald Trump and Donald Trump doing some highly psychotic things at a later point in time. It demonizes the American people. Now, we know how psychology goes. Look at how many people have demonized all Middle Eastern people based on the perceivable actions of their governments, whether it be Gaddafi in Libya, or whether it be this fallacy that the Taliban by themselves took over Afghanistan. No, they did it with Western intelligence help. They were split off from the Mujahideen. Doesn't matter. Afghan people demonized. The same thing is going to happen to the American people. I have grave concern for the white woman. I always have. There's this evil that is building, and they have built up this false rape threat to really overstimulate those instinctual aspects within a woman that's able to detect danger. And by overdriving that and overstimulating those adrenals, you can end up in a situation where people, again, just shut out and shut down from information concerning potential threats because it's been overdriven in other areas. And so, there are some serious things coming to this country. And the very worst thing for people to be doing in a collapse is in this race bait hysteria, and going into camps, acting like they're in a giant prison. I have some concluding thoughts, but I'm going to pause there. Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, the potential likelihood of the white slavery, like you were mentioning, is of course it's on the table, right? I think that's just kind of obvious for anybody who kind of studies foreign policy issues and mentions about China and Russia like you have many times and so forth. And the sad part of it is that much like in Germany during World War II, when the National Socialists were running the government there at that time, there was a anti-war group of students, actually. They were known as the White Rose Society. And they were all executed, of course, for merely distributing pamphlets saying, hey, these Nazi wars are kind of odd, maybe it's kind of a bad thing. And, it's just, Sophia Scroll and I believe it was her brother and so forth. And, I was just thinking that, maybe there should be a version on a theme of that, here in the States. Obviously not of that same name, especially because it might confuse people, especially with the first word of that term. But, I was just thinking, the idea of kind of showing that, we're not all like that. Some of us really weren't like these, racially collectivistic nationalists. In the very worst sense, where it's all like you were saying, throw up a border and shut yourselves off in a bad way, and also something else too. Economists have said repetitively over the years, good economists like the Austrians have said that if goods don't cross borders, armies will. So yes, when Trump is basically promoting his what I do agree with John Oliver about is really a boondoggle that would waste taxpayer money, and that's a whole separate topic unto itself in terms of being a failed government project, much like defending the so-called southern border itself by USBP, which they suck at. And yes, it is an issue here in Texas, has been for a long time. But yeah, it's just, not all of us were like that. And I wish more people would be more publicly about rebuking this racial collectivism.
A little bit of a history lesson. So when Nazi Germany fell, they were invaded by Russia. And what a lot of people don't want to look at, probably because it's too traumatic, is that there were mass rapes of German women on the part of Russian troops. And this went on for a significant period in time. And there's actually been some films and documentaries that they've done on this. But I think that that's what people forget.
Yeah.
The aftermath of what happened with all of that. And if we're honest with ourselves and we look at the death toll, regardless of what they're counting, I mean, it's sick that they admit that they have only been counting the civilians in Afghanistan since the year 2009.
Oh.
So there's a sickness in that. Also a sickness in the Americans that are pro-Russia without knowing their history. So my final thoughts, my final sermon, I think that humans have a choice to make. They can either buckle under this false threat and promote war and death of others to protect themselves. Or another unfortunate route, be so afraid of imprisonment that they keep their mouths shut. Or they could save their own soul. Not to sound too religious, they can evolve their own soul and do what's right. Regardless of the risk, without a doubt, on a subconscious level, the people are afraid of doing what's right. Afraid of consequence. And I think that's the thing that needs to change. You know, I'd like to live to be in my older years. But if I'm faced with A, don't be who you are and keep your mouth shut and live a longer life, or B, do the right thing, speak your truth, fulfill your destiny, evolve your soul, but take on the risk of retaliation for doing the right thing in a violent world, I'm going to go in the direction of B. I'm going to evolve my own soul. Because our soul is something that none of these entities, none of these institutions, none of these warlords, not this New World Order system, it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us. This is a temporary experience, to be general, our lives here on Earth. And if we want to escape the harvesting of souls, which likely is occurring right now, then we have to do the right thing. We have to speak our truth, and we have to be willing to take those risks. You know, because this is a larger experiment. You know, I see all these people that are being led in all these directions, and I really worry for their souls and their physical bodies, because they know not what they do. They know not what they're engaged in. They know not about the potential that they've brought back some bad energy. We'll keep it at that. The troops have, from stepping foot into ancient Babylon and setting off those bombs. So yeah, I don't know what's going on, but I'm convinced there's some sort of agenda to, whether we call it the Semites or the Semitic race, the Arabs, this group of people on this, in this part of the planet, in that part of the planet. There's a reason why all this turmoil has been built up in this part of the world. And there is so much evil wrapped up in occupying foreign lands and crucifying human beings. Doesn't matter if they weren't put up on the cross like Jesus. These people have been crucified. These people have been vilified. I mean, we are witnessing the New World Order in action now. Forget the future. This is the Terminator robot apocalypse with drones murdering people overseas. Again, in closing, you have a choice to make. Either evolve your own soul, speak the truth, take the risk by being you, not partaking in this, or risk losing something great within you by bathing in the blood and drinking the blood. And that is all I have to say. Kyle, thanks for being here and adding in your 2 cents. A lot of stuff we said here, a lot of speculation, but you know, I really think that people have a choice to make, and that there isn't really a gray line here.
Yeah, agreed. And it's good to talk with you about these topics, even though they are can be controversial at times.
All right.